Well, thank you for that welcome, and thank you for allowing me to do this in Greek. And particularly thank you to the translators who were presented with an unexpected situation today and have responded magnificently. I'm going to try to explain to you a narrative technique, and I'm going to give you a lot of information. However, this is interactive in exactly the sense that Jack intended. Thank you. And you can show how that is so by looking at the URLs at the bottom of that frame. This presentation is at that URL. You can get that presentation. When you get that presentation, it will be on a blog. And what you know already is that means that you can respond. So we can go on learning from each other into the indefinite future by exchanging views, supplementing them, contesting them, and all of that is available if you go to the URL, this presentation, the text at. If you go to this presentation at, you'll get this presentation, and you'll see that at the end of the presentation I've given you a number of options for accessing the material and getting alerted to new ideas that are emerging. So I hope that that is interactive enough. It's certainly, we are into a long-term project here. This is not going to come up with easy solutions in short order. Now, what I want to say to you about this first frame is that I'm going to try to tell you about a narrative technique. It's called three-scene storyboarding. And it is designed to introduce people to a way of setting down an account of their own life, which makes their sense of it. It makes their sense of it. So they will be engaged with scenes, episodes, turning points, all kinds of ideas that actually do not appear very frequently in conventional careers guidance. It's rather a distinctive approach. What I noticed about doing that was that as the responses came back from what I was proposing, some dissonances emerged. Some ideas that seemed to be in conflict with each other and that needed attention. And what I've done here is listed 5 of those dissonances. And in each of those cases, there is a movement from left to right between what I've called thinking about it in terms of decision making. No, let's think about it in terms of moving on. Moving on makes much more sense. It's a much more inclusive term than decision making. Let's not think so much of it in terms of expertise. We've got that in common, certainly. Let's think of it in terms of our expertise. Why don't we think of it in terms of their experience? What is their experience of what is happening in their lives? That makes it much less of an analysis, and it makes it much more of a narrative. And the justification for narrative is this idea that is the natural way in which people think about how one thing leads to another. That's what a narrative is, one thing leading to another. I want to spend a little bit of time on the philosophy of this. There are some philosophies which stop at looking at the possibilities that exist in a career management situation. I want to think about this in much more pragmatic terms, and I have got an important source that I just want briefly to share with you on that. Remember, you can get all of this and all the references by going to one or both of the URLs at the bottom of that page. And then I want to make a distinction between shareholding and stakeholding. Shareholding is a dominant notion in careers work because it's seen to be for the benefits of both students and clients, and on the other hand, commerce and business. And commerce and business, of course, thinks in terms of shareholders. We need a broader concept. Stakeholder is a broader concept than shareholder. So that is where we're going, and one stage at a time, we'll get there. I'll put the heading at the top. This is about decision making and moving on. I'm going to explain to you what I think are the principal elements of narrative are. What is going to happen at the bottom as we move along is that notion that this is a distinctive perspective on careers work is going to be expanded stage by stage. So each time I go to a new frame, you'll see something added to that distinctive perspective line at the bottom of the page. This is where I want to say just a little bit about storyboarding, three-scene storyboarding. It is a words and pictures portrayal of experience. That is what it is there for. And it therefore comprises episodes and scenes, and in particular, turning points. In using the technique, we encourage people to look for a time in their lives when things could change. That is a turning point, a fork in the road, another way of going. Maybe retracing your steps and starting again. But looking at it in terms of, what else could I do? What else could I do about this? Useful meaning and sustainable purpose is the objective of storyboarding. And sustainable purpose means a storyboard which has not only been set down, but has been conversed, has been talked about, has received feedback, is capable of being modified in response to a conversation. Decision and choice in a wider context refers to the fact that decision-making has been the dominant notion in conventional careers work in the UK for as long as I can remember, which is a long time. And the point that I want to make is that this is not decision-making in the sense of making a decision now and then getting on with it immediately, or in the sense of choosing something from a range of options and then making that a basis for my life. This is decision-making in the sense of moving on stage by stage. So it's taking decision-making and putting it into a wider context. Now that wider context I call moving on, holding on and letting go. That does need more elaboration, I appreciate that. Let me briefly try to explain to you what I mean. When people are moving out of an entrapped situation in which they have few options, they not only have to know how to move out of that, they need to know how to live with the consequences of moving out of that. And in some cases, letting go of trusted friends, or a revered religion, or an important series of contacts in their own upbringing, is a very high price for them to pay. I tried to make the point earlier. It's a high price to pay. So what I would prefer to do is soften that, make that a more human concept, not imposing a ready-made decision-making paradigm on people, but asking them to look at what is it that you do need to hold on to, and what is it that you know you can afford to let go. Now, I hope I'm making that clear, because that is a critical. So let's go on to the next one. Now we're dealing with change and disturbance and what feels like chaos, which may very well be chaos. I think you probably know as much about this at least as I do. But what storyboarding is there for is in order to respond to changing cultural conditions. It's a response to change. Now, here are the elements that I want to refer to here. There's increasing evidence, and this is not only in your society, this is throughout the globe in one way or another, what is happening is that constraints on people's options are tightening, the pressures upon them to conform to other people's expectations, the persuaders, are increasing, and there is greater fluidity. I've got references in the blog for all of this. You can look up the source for all of these remarks that I'm making. But it's called liquid modernity, you might know the term. And what it is the unpredictability of what on earth is going to happen next. I want storyboarding to be a way of asking people to gather their own account of how they are going to deal with that. And it now comes to me very strongly, as soon as I say that to myself, that we're not talking about career development in a conventional sense. That is, career development is what expert careers advisors know about. Career management is what students, clients, and people making their way forward, moving on, it is what they do. Career management is what they do. Career development is what we do. And so career management becomes a key phrase. Storyboarding is, how are you going? In 3 scenes, tell me the how and the why and the when and the where of how you are going to move on in your life. That is what it's there for. Turning points is a particularly critical phrase here, because turning points holds out the possibility, as I mentioned before, of the change of direction. And a change of direction means this person can be flexible. This person can do something that she never expected to do before she made out the storyboard. And we have evidence that the storyboard does reveal, because it's embodied, because there is a physicality about it, because there are words as well as images, it has a way of drawing people into their own story. It is their own story in such a way as they begin to see, well, I needn't do that, I could do something else. Now, there is a philosopher who has come up with the wonderful phrase, evitability. You know the word inevitability. Inevitability says that where you were born will determine where you work. And I'm afraid in all our societies that is too near the truth to be comfortable. And so this philosopher has coined the term evitability. Nothing is inevitable. And that is a powerful voice to bring forward, particularly when we're thinking, as you can see there, of social mobility. Social mobility moving on away from and towards another location in your life, perhaps unexpectedly, perhaps to the disappointment of the people you love most and who most love you. That's the issue. What can I let go? What must I hold on to? How am I going to move on? We're moving on in the bottom line. Can you see there? Well, now we're going to retell expert lists as stories of experience. So we need to think here about in analysis and narrative about what careers work is for. Now, the conventional careers work, this is what is distinctive about this approach. I'm not talking so much about storyboarding. Storyboarding is just an example. I'm talking about the uses of narrative. It's a much more general proposition that I'm making to you here. Conventional careers work is characteristically about matched employability. It's about finding things out from lists like databases and checklists and psychometrics. All of that apparatus that experts use is generally shown in analytical, that is to say, listed form. Matched employability is a narrower concept than the well-being of your students and your clients. And I've heard several people in this conference make an appeal to, we're doing this because we want this to be good for the well-being of the person. There has been a big shift in the emphasis in the UK between employability and well-being. Well-being has been cast aside as a concept. Employability is held up as the primary concept for the purposes of careers work. I say to that, no. Well-being is the more inclusive concept. The thing of it is that an expanding economy is what matched employability worked best for. For about 100 years, as a matter of fact, careers work throughout, certainly throughout the Western world, was based on the idea of pursuing employability by matching people to available work. In a situation of zero-sum stagnation, that is, where there is no expanding economy, the idea of employability becomes highly suspect, because the same person on one occasion can come to an expert careers counsellor and can say who she is, what she's interested in and what she wants to do the psychometrics, fill in the questionnaire, and if she does it now, it will give a different answer to how employable it is to the answer it will give when the economy contracts. When the economy contracts, employability becomes more of a challenge, harder to reach. It is not what we say to the students that gets them jobs. It is how the economy expands and contracts. And that makes the idea of employability highly problematic as a basic notion for our work. So, but there is another reason for this. There was a book published some years ago called Willing Slaves. Willing Slaves. And the idea was that when people go to work, they are not, generally speaking, thinking so much of what it is that they need to do for the employer. They are thinking in terms of what it is they need to do for the people that they love most. How they are going to look after their child in this job. Whether it is going to be something which is going to be reconcilable with their friends and the people that they trust most or not. Whether it is going to affect their health, whether they will be able to take on the stress, whether they're going to be happy in this job. And they're quite different sorts of considerations. You could call those considerations considerations of well-being rather than of employability. That book had a powerful impact on me. It was practically universally ignored in the UK careers movement because it came from outside their literature. It came from outside their literature. But the notion had an important impact on me because I realised that we had a term which we called labour market information. Labour market information. And labour market information is labour economics made easy to understand. It goes in the databases as lists of opportunities that might exist. What we need is another term which is labour market experience. And what people say about their own experience in the labour market is different from what commerce and policy says should be their experience. It is different. There is a dissonance there. There's rather clear emerging evidence in the UK that students and clients in higher education in particular are very interested in the consequences for other people of their decisions, and there are people who are concerned that their neighbourhoods and that other people's neighbourhoods and that Africa might suffer as a result. And I have to tell you, there are some jobs that any of your clients could choose which are still harming Africa. And there are more and more people, it seems, are beginning to say, well, I do have a personal interest in this, but there is also a planetary, a neighbourhood, a social concern that I want to put. So for all of those reasons, I'm saying to you that I think that we need to extend this argument by talking about how expert lists get transposed into narrative. I lost my thread then. It's an age thing. I'll be all right in a minute. Possibility and pragmatism. Now this is really going to be difficult to get across. Philosophy for careers work. I mean, there have been several references to the fact that we need an ethic. Well, ethic is a branch of philosophy. I'm going to tell you about somebody who draws on Socrates and Plato, but actually not Aristotle, but draws on Socrates and his name is, I will tell you his name is, I've got it written here somewhere, I think, Peter Sloterdijk, but you'll find the reference there. Now what this guy is saying runs something like this. That in each generation, and he runs back over centuries. This is a centuries-long analysis that he completes here. There is in society always an elite persuasion and a marginal doubt. What he means by an elite persuasion is that there will be certain people who can take command of the means of communication, and they can use those means of communication to get across the messages that they regard as cool or fashionable or exciting or interesting, or, although you didn't realise it, in your interest. You'll thank me for this one day. And those kinds of elite persuaders have always been in society. There has never been a time, according to Sloterdijk, where that has not been part of how society operates. So we're looking at the way in which people are drawn into compliance rather than finding their own independence. I don't use the word empowerment, I use the word independence. And that independence can be a group independence or it can be an individual independence. But it can say, I don't have to agree with you about what you're saying about this. And the evidence that we're getting is that people are increasingly able and willing and wanting to say that our experience does not correspond with the good words that you're saying about yourself as a politician, or the good words that you're saying about yourself as a commercial organisation, or even the good words that you're saying about yourself as a professional person. That you might claim all those things, but our experience says it's not like that. So the idea of connectedness, which everybody now wants to have a part of, connectedness is a big term in this level of discussion in cultural theory. Connectedness. Connectedness needs to be predicated. Do you know your English? The predication is what comes after the verb and the noun. The predication. What it asks is linked to whom? For whose benefit is this? And increasingly people are prepared to say, this is not for my benefit. What my experience tells me is not what you are telling me you want me to believe. What I experience is not what you tell me you want me to believe. Now, if ever there was a basis for constructive argument about what is going on, it is there. And we need it. And I thought that that was what education was supposed to be about until we got our last government. I shouldn't have said that. Okay, so we've got a basis here for reframing research and development. Now this is where no voice dominates and none goes unheard. This is the completion. This is that story running from left to right along the bottom there. This is where no voice dominates and none goes unheard. And we're going to reposition Careers narrative by just noticing a few things. The uses of narrative is the default position of the human species. There is no society in the world that does not use narrative in order to communicate its idea about itself. There is no religion, there is no culture, there is no neighbourhood which is incapable of understanding itself in terms of this is our story, this is the story that we want to tell. So we're dealing with what is a pretty well universal phenomenon. What that means is that we can make contact with all kinds of people as partners in our work. We can find professional people, we can find volunteer people, we can find people in the schools, we can find people in the community who will understand the importance of narrative and who will also understand the importance of applying narrative to career management, not career development, career management. And so we're offering something to partners and stakeholders concerning the possibility of a much broader base for understanding how we can work together in all of those relationships, because narrative is such a recognisable term. And career development is not a hard idea to persuade people about. If you think about it, career development is what happens in order to determine who gets to do what in your society. And too often, who gets to do what in our society in the UK has to do with where they're born rather than how they see themselves in society. So there is the plea. So that's why I put down private, public, voluntary and professional. That's why I put down independent of elite interests. And Sloterdijk notes very clearly what the characteristics are of an independent person working on career management. He shows us how to interrogate those narratives because they do need to be probed, and he shows how that can contribute to the way in which we think about people in society in a much more open, I would say more liberal, and I think more inclusive way. So, any hope here? Well, there are some, can you see some URLs at the bottom there where you can get hold of? So if you download this with one of the URLs at the front end, you'll get all of those URLs at the back end. The blog is at Cloudworks, at that thing. If you want to be alerted, this is my little plug for my website, if you want to be alerted to more information about this as it emerges, and more information about what is going on various blogs, you can get to me through Twitter. And if ever there was a social networking activity that got the wrong name, it was Twitter. It is a wonderfully useful professional device for staying in contact with what is going on around you. You have been wonderfully patient. I have overrun my time. Thank you to my translators. I didn't see you burst into tears, so it seems to be all right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bill. As good as always, or as ever, as you sang.